Living as one of the 8 billion people currently running around our tiny blue planet certainly presents itself with lots of intricacies, doesn't it? Sometimes living can be dictated by the country you were born in,
It is too round on the top, it needs to be pointy.
the culture from where you come from, and even right down to the way your parents run your household. And yet, there's always been some hard truths about the world we made that's already constant from the moment we open our eyes. There are always undeniable facts that span across borders and barriers, whether it be from man's own design or by nature. I mean, in general, it is widely accepted what man considers an action to be a sin, right?
Joseph Dredd.
It's a lie! The evidence has been falsified! It's impossible! I never broke the law!
Each and every one of our civilizations, most of them, to be honest, have an idea of what's morally good or bad, though admittedly that description can be hard to fit to those we have put on a seat of power, given all the atrocities that's been going around even before our very eyes. It's safe to say most of us common people are pretty aware of the aforementioned truths about the world. That is especially so considering we're at the height of technological advancements unprecedented in the history of our civilization that's mind-bogglingly still progressing at this very moment. Each piece of information, no matter how obscure or outdated, can be pretty much sourced with the relative ease of being just a tap away. Even though the year 2024 is still young, the technology to be able to see and essentially project yourself to a virtual world has all the more been enhanced with the introduction of immersive interfaces. And so, with all that considered, if I were to ask you if you were somewhat knowledgeable about all the happenings in the globe, you'd probably say yes, right?
In French, when you want to say yes, you say oui, oui.
You gotta be kidding me! Oh my God! That is hysterical!
Considering how open and, more importantly, heavy social media is with information, you could probably give me a rundown of all the current social issues, global crises, and the events of your local high school. Surely, there's no reason for you to doubt your own power in searching for facts. It's not a crime, and besides, nothing stops the truth from coming out, right? Well, what if I were to tell you there was someone who had figured it all out better than most of us, all of the truth that could very well affect each and every person living on Earth? What if I were to tell you that he himself chose to divulge all the complications he had discovered about our world in a manuscript? And what if I were to tell you that that information was locked up, analyzed, and perhaps watered down before it was released to the general public after a long time, in fear that the truths revealed from those texts were too much for us to handle? For example, if it was about the end of times, you'd probably think that that's crazy, as I'm sure it's the first you're hearing of it. Then let me introduce you to Dr. Chan Thomas's 1966 book, The Adam and Eve Story and Its History with the CIA. Let's first tackle the bigger entity of this story, the CIA. Now, even if you aren't an American, I think it's pretty fair to assume you still have an inkling of an idea about what type of government program this is, seeing as how it's really popular nowadays due to it being repeatedly represented in mainstream action movies. Anyway, to give you a bit of a background, the CIA, or the Central Intelligence Agency, can be described in simpler terms as an overseer of information for the federal government of the United States of America, with that information mainly coming from overseas. Essentially, they are a government body that deals with the acquisition of intel around the world and the subsequent strategic planning, all in regards to a better national security. Supposedly, they have no domestic law operations in US soil, only overseas, which is the main distinction between them and the FBI.
FBI!
In 2022, it has been reported that they still continue to operate and conduct surveillance and gathering information on its own people on domestic grounds, and notably, without the supervision of congressional law. So, the question needs to be raised. Why is a heavily favored government intelligence agency that is mainly focused on intel gathering on other nations, who by all accounts has no shortage of budget and has figuratively bigger fish to fry, had become so focused on Dr. Thomas's book that they had to essentially classify it and take it away from public access, and only releasing a snippet of it after it has been thoroughly, quote-unquote, sanitized almost 60 years later? Well, maybe it's because Dr. Thomas wrote about the end of the world. Now, how does a writer like Thomas describe the end of all that we know and love? Well, the answer is that Thomas's theory of the cataclysmic event that leads to our civilization's demise centers around the ever-changing world of ours. Just based on the book's title, one would think that it's perhaps a romanticized retelling of the first man and woman on Earth and their love story. Unfortunately, the true contents of the book are much more grim than that. Let's first look at the man who had the world-ending catastrophe all figured out. Apparently in 1967, McDonnell Douglas, a now dissolved aerospace company, decided to commission 4 researchers in order to study extraterrestrial life, the UFOs that were so prevalent back in the day. They weren't looking to donate to the world of science, but rather they hoped to deduce the supposed technological magic behind their vehicles that brought them from the corners of space to our planet. And as luck would have it, one of those scientists hired was allegedly Dr. Thomas himself. Although, for his supposed genius, he also claimed he was able to make contact with the aliens through his supposed extrasensory perception. Granted, we are not here to talk about the eccentricities of a man who had a long history of challenging the boundaries of what's known. That's because what this man is most remembered for is his book. And what does the book contain? What makes the Adam and Eve story so, for lack of a better word, dangerous yet intriguing? Essentially, the book suggests we are in a cycle of building civilizations to their eventual destruction, that is. The book briefly covers the lacking aspects of man in its own created civilization, with the emergence of nuclear weapons and the political tension it caused among nations at the time, to blatant corruption, and even has a section dedicated to notable people. Interestingly, even Muhammad Ali, who went by the name of Cassius Clay then, made the book for his refusal to be drafted to the Vietnam War, going against the government for peace. And yet, the book heavily suggests that no matter how the flow of society goes, no matter who sits on top and who controls the world, we are all going to the same destination. Right from the first pages of the book, it tells of the next big cataclysm that apparently had come and gone during the time of Noah and during the time of the titular characters, Adam and Eve. The book suggests that we are on the latter end of the cycle, waiting for destruction in order to usher in a new era. To his credit, Dr. Thomas more or less based his writings on pseudoscience a little bit more than his interpretations of the religious texts of the Bible. He cited the early work of Georges Cuvier, entitled The Theory of the Earth, dated 1812 in his book. In layman's terms, Cuvier theorized that there have been a lot of changes in the Earth's surface, and these significant variations were brought about by catastrophes, resulting in the great shifting of the continents. Kudos to him, as now we know that the Earth truly did have a supercontinent millions of years ago, and that the crust of the planet really are shifting by the second, though at an alarmingly small rate. Nonetheless, Thomas was sure he had found evidence that our planet experiences pattern changes that alternate over time. But what of their cause? Why did these alterations occur? Those are the very questions that Cuvier posed, and the same ones that appear to have gnawed at Dr. Chan Thomas' greater part of his thinking. And alas, his revelation came to him. Amongst all his research on many branches of science, he found his link. He can now supposedly validate the approximate dates of these cataclysmic events from the past, those of which there had been 5 of, with the last one being the Great Flood experienced by Noah, documented in the Bible about 6,500 years ago. He also believed that Noah isn't just a fluke survivor of a cataclysmic event, and that there are others who survived previous ones during their lifetimes. Thomas took other significant figures of other cultures, whether it be mythological or of religious importance, and stuck them as supposed survivors of destruction, who then lead the new civilization with enough knowledge from their old ones that they're treated as a god or legendary figure in the next one. The aforementioned Noah, Vishnu, and even the Egyptian god Osiris fit this description, according to the book. So imagine, literally tons of advanced civilizations have come and gone on the Earth, wiped out without a trace, especially those farther back in time. The ones that do leave a clue become such a puzzle for us to deduce how advanced life would have been for them. And yet again, what Thomas does right is his eagerness for at least a scientific backing for his theories. And apart from the constant shifting of the Earth's crust, he also hit the shifting of the Earth's magnetic pole correctly. He theorized that the ice caps located at both poles shift down to the equator during these cataclysmic events, and that's what caused the sudden emergence of the last ice age. Although he says the answer to his previous question he obsessed over, the why of the cataclysm, is answered by having a literal atomic explosion between the Earth's solid and liquid core. causing the disturbance that'll enact the very changes that wiped out countless other intelligent civilizations before us. The rest were all analysis of biblical texts, and more so than anything, we humans are actually changing with the Earth as it approaches a cataclysmic event. Apparently, the longer it takes a civilization to develop as it heads for one, the more evil and twisted the people become, thereby creating a compelling need to be cleansed and make way for better civilizations. So whether it be through the morality of men or unconventional geographical changes, it seems we are doomed to head into another great flood, or perhaps a new ice age. And yet, why did the CIA think of the need to actually take apart Dr. Thomas's book and release only 57 pages from the original 284? Well, perhaps they've gone out of their way to ensure no matters of unconventional theory would spook the general public for no apparent reason. Or perhaps they speculated that these predictions of the end of the world might have an inkling of truth behind them. Or perhaps they just wanted to control the dispersion of this truly potentially disruptive information that can change public opinion. Whatever the case, it's all still speculative since the CIA isn't actually required to publicly disclose anything about their decision, most of the time, that is. For us, what matters now is not the validity of Dr. Thomas's book, but rather the message it tries to say. Essentially, our current human civilization is heading for its own doom. It may not be for the reasons the book states, as I doubt everyone deciding to become morally good would change the Earth's environmental troubles, even if admittedly that isn't a bad idea seeing as we humans have done despicable things. But the matter of the fact is, the current climate change and most of what ails the planet is entirely our fault. Constant pollution and unsustainable practices are our doing. Perhaps the end of the world is too much for us to handle, which is why it remained undisclosed until recently, but we have to face the inevitable outcome of abusing our Earth. Now, this entire discussion is not to cause paranoia, rather it serves as a reminder that we are now aware of the daunting potential future we and our planet could possibly face down the road.
Sorry, Chris, the plant can't come.
Albeit different from what the book portrays as the reason for humanity's downfall.
You're all killers.
Let's not prove the Adam and Eve story, right? Let's not go down that path while there's still time.